A man's voice rings out through the sky, shouting Mu Myong's name loudly. Down on the ground, a skinny and dirty boy is startled by this sudden call. Then, a holy voice from above orders him to protect a child, telling him that this duty will be his only reason for living. This command comes directly from the leader of the Celestial Clan, the great Cheon Gang. The boy now understands that this will be his new life's mission. He looks at the little child he must protect, the first son, Cheon Riang. Even though the young boy is in a very poor and miserable condition, he accepts his destiny without any questions. At that moment, he had no idea what the future would bring for that crying baby. The boy only saw a child who truly needed his protection. He did not know that this baby would grow up to become a huge disgrace, bringing total ruin to the entire Celestial Clan. 15 years pass by, and a heavy rain begins to fall. In the meantime, the head of the family suddenly dies, leaving everything behind for his son. The new leader, Cheon Riang, only makes things much worse, and the clan's great power completely vanishes. With their loss of power, many people start to run away and abandon the family. But the young protector stays right by his master's side the whole time. A huge number of enemies come after the boy, and the guard fights them all to keep him safe. The man gave his whole life to be a bodyguard for that terrible person. However, the people he protected always seemed to be very afraid of something. Suddenly, two mysterious figures appear at the door in the middle of the rain. In a shocking act of betrayal, the man he protected his entire life hits him from behind. In complete disbelief, the guard calls out his master's name, not understanding the reason for this betrayal. The young man wonders if a sharp blade is his only reward for all his years of devotion. But the betrayer looks totally terrified, crying just like a frightened child. As his strength quickly fades, the protector collapses and falls to his knees. The emotional pain of this betrayal feels much greater than the deep physical wound in his chest. People say you cannot fix a broken person, and his life was living proof of that. All the guards he had defeated before are now lying dead in the rainy courtyard. The master looks desperate, trying hard to explain something to the newcomers. The mysterious figures wearing hoods approach him slowly, without saying a single word. Even though he is badly wounded, the man uses his last bit of strength to pull out the sword. With pure hate in his eyes, he calls out the name of the man who betrayed him one last time. He then asks his master if he really thought they would let him live in exchange for his bodyguard's life. And he questions if the demonic cult would truly help rebuild the clan he destroyed himself. The young man accuses him of foolishly believing this was the only way to survive. With blood in his mouth, the protector states that his master was completely wrong. At that exact moment, a scary flash of lightning lights up the entire night sky. The bright light finally reveals the true identities of the visitors from the demonic cult. A woman with a strangely ruined face is among them, and a masked giant carries the remains of their enemies as trophies. Seeing those terrifying figures, the cowardly master panics completely. One of the cult members says that if he wanted to live, he should not have gotten them involved. Then the giant attacks the cowardly master, who tries to run away while screaming in fear. With a single blow, the traitor's life is brought to a very quick end. Watching this scene, the protector deeply regrets serving that man from the very beginning. Lying on the ground, he wonders if his former lord is watching everything. The warrior realizes that the first son was never worth protecting. He regrets not abandoning that useless person a long time ago and remembers his own past. With that, the protector's sword falls from his hand, making a loud sound that echoes through the courtyard. Kneeling and powerless, the man looks at the bodies scattered across the ground. The rainy sky seems to reflect all the sadness and regret in his heart. He accepts his end, saying there is no point in blaming anyone now. Staring into the empty space, the protector says that only regrets remain. In his eyes, we see the reflection of the sky from the day his life changed forever. He remembers that he did not have a name before being taken in by the Celestial Clan. It was there that he received the name Mu Myong, which basically means no name. The warrior looks at the clan building one last time, completely accepting his tragic fate. His last wish was that if he could ever be born again, he wanted to have a real name of his own. He also wished not to come back to life as himself, right as the cult members gave him the final blow. And like that, the man who never had a name finally died on that cold, rainy night. Death then takes him, and it feels like a very cold and lonely thing. But suddenly, the cold darkness changes into a warm and gentle light. He feels soft hands washing his feet in a bowl of warm water, which makes him slowly open his eyes. The man feels confused by this nice and comfortable feeling. A young servant girl is taking care of him, looking very focused on what she is doing. He suddenly sits up in shock, and the frightened girl falls backward, screaming out loud. Confused, he wonders what is going on, and suddenly realizes that he is actually alive. He remembers very clearly that his old body was pierced by many sharp blades. The servant quickly apologizes to him, thinking he is angry about the water temperature. But he recognizes her face immediately. She is Woo Young, the first son's personal maid, who used to be treated very badly by him. He tells her not to worry, but he feels very confused about why she is calling him young master. Ignoring how confused the girl looks, he asks her where Cheon Mu-riang is. The servant replies with surprise that he himself is the young master Cheon Mu-riang. Not believing what he just heard, the man touches his own face in total shock and sadness. Feeling desperate, he runs around to find any place where he can see his reflection. In the water bowl, he looks down and sees the face of the young traitor he hated so much. Later that night, he confirms that all of this is real and not a dream. Not only is he alive again, but he has also traveled 15 years back into the past. He is now inside the body of that useless and good-for-nothing person. Sitting on the bed, he looks closely at his new, chubby hands, completely unsure of what he should do next. He then asks the servant girl if there is a person named Mu Myong in the clan, but she says no. He understands now that because he became Cheon Mu-riang, his past self does not exist anymore. He sees this as a great chance to protect the celestial clan using his own hands. With that thought, he decides he will figure out a plan step by step, since he has 15 long years ahead of him. But putting that aside, he wonders why the room of the first son looks so cheap and plain. The place is barely bigger than a common student's room, which is very strange to him. As he looks around, his eyes stop on a shiny object sitting on a shelf. That blue glow looks very familiar, and he tries hard to remember where he saw it before. Then he remembers that this was the exact sword used to kill him in his past life. Shocked, he recognizes the famous celestial light sword right there in front of him. This is the legendary weapon that was created from a single beam of light that cut through the darkness, and it is a treasure given only to the first son of the clan. He cannot believe that this powerful sword now belongs to him. With a smile on his face, he looks at his reflection in the sharp metal of the sword. As he pulls the weapon out, a bright light shines through the whole dark room. He realizes that this sword is on a totally different level compared to the cheap swords he used before. Feeling excited, he tries to practice a few fighting moves with the legendary sword in his hand. But his current body is far too weak, and he can barely even lift the heavy weapon up. He loses his breath after doing the smallest movement, which shows how out of shape this body is. His legs shake badly, and he almost drops the valuable sword onto the hard floor. Feeling completely tired, he drops to his knees on the ground, breathing heavily and having no energy left at all. He cannot believe his muscles and breathing are already at their limit after so little work. That same night, our hero starts to check the physical condition of his new body. He sits down with his legs crossed to meditate so he can check his inner energy. The young man finds the situation strange, because even the past owner of this body should have known how to use a sword. Normally, inner energy is built up in the stomach area and flows smoothly through the body's energy paths. But when he checks the boy's body, he finds out that something is completely wrong with the energy. A massive amount of power is trapped and fighting against itself inside him. This looks like a clear example of taking too many magical medicines, which rich boys often do. He realizes the problem is an overdose of elixirs and walks out to the training fields. When he arrives, the young man sees several students practicing their fighting moves with wooden swords. In the middle of the practice, one of the guys hits his opponent's head with all his strength. The boy who got hit complains angrily to his partner for targeting his head so hard. But the attacker just calls him weak like a girl and tells him to pay the money he lost on their bet. Angrily, the loser says that this specific round does not count and refuses to give him the money. The winner feels confused by his friend's bad reaction and looks at him, not understanding this childish anger. At that exact moment, the two boys notice that our hero has arrived, and one of them recognizes his face. The other boy then asks what that useless person is doing there, since he never comes to practice. Our hero can barely hold his weapon and realizes that his body is in a terrible state. One of the students tells him to get out because nobody wants him around. Ignoring their mean words, he decides that the most important thing right now is to lose this weight, so he starts to run. The other fighters are completely shocked as they watch the strange sight of this chubby guy running with so much difficulty. Our hero continues running through the yard, while everyone looks at him with hate and disrespect. Seeing this strange sight, 3 of the students start talking behind his back about the fat guy running. One of them says that the young man does not seem to have any plans to leave. With an evil smile, another fighter says he is going to make him regret ever coming to the field. The bully then throws his wooden sword straight toward our hero. The boy can barely stand on his feet as the object flies right at him. He realizes at that moment that his body's physical condition is much worse than he thought. The many magical medicines the past owner took have turned into a strong poison inside him. If the boy had practiced before, he would have had an inner strength that everyone would be jealous of. But first, he needs to prepare his body so it can take in the medicines and start training. Suddenly, a real steel sword flies toward him and almost cuts him. The blade passes right next to him and gets stuck into a nearby wooden post. Shocked and scared, the young master looks at the weapon, not believing what just happened. He wonders if that was really a real weapon and becomes truly terrified. The bully walks up to him and apologizes, saying the sword just slipped out of his hand. Behind him, the group of students laughs at the situation with mean looks in their eyes. The leader of the bullies makes a funny face to mock him as he gets closer to the fat boy. Our hero looks back at the attackers with a very serious face, breaking out in a cold sweat. They warn him that this place is very dangerous and tell him that he should go back to his room. The main character wonders if things were really this bad in the past. The bully thinks that after a warning like this, the pig will go back to hide in his room. With a fake smile, he says he is sorry again for the accident with the sword. But the young master actually thanks him for caring and says he will be careful. Then he turns around and starts running again, leaving all the bullies behind in total confusion. The group of bullies starts laughing at him, and one of them takes the money from a bet he won. With the bet money in their hands, they decide to go out drinking to celebrate their fun. But the leader of the group stares at our hero with pure hate in his eyes and grinds his teeth tightly. Despite this mean trick, the young man keeps running, not caring about them at all. He thinks those fighters are terrible people, but he decides to control his anger, knowing he would lose a fight right now. Putting that problem aside, he focuses on his main goal, which is to go to the great library of the Heavenly Dragon. As the oldest son, he believes he will easily get inside to read the clan's secret martial arts books. The sun begins to go down and the boy finally arrives at his destination. When he gets there, he finds 2 guards blocking the doorway to the big library. Feeling confused, he asks one of the guards what he just said to him. The guard then lets out a big sigh with a very unfriendly face looking at the young master. He repeats clearly that the young master has been removed from his position as the next leader. Hearing this, the main character is in total shock, because he did not expect this bad news at all. Because of this choice, his entry into the library was completely stopped and forbidden. With his legs shaking from shock, the young man walks back to his room, unable to believe what he heard. Feeling completely ruined, he throws himself onto the bed, not knowing what to do now that his first plan has failed. Sitting up on the bed, he looks around the space and stares at the door of his tiny room. Then he finally understands why his living space is so cheap and small. He planned to find a way to take in the energy from the medicines, but now he must change his plan completely. Looking up at the ceiling, He remembers that the childhood of the body's past owner was not easy at all. He remembers that the boy had a body ruined by bad medicines and was surrounded by many enemies. And he thinks about the betrayal, wondering if the young man saw him as an enemy back then too. Angrily, he holds the bedsheets tightly and says he does not need to make excuses for that trash of a person. The boy blames the past owner of the body for bringing in the evil demonic cult and destroying the whole clan. He understands now that having no friends or allies was just a result of the boy's bad actions. At that moment, he notices that there is something sitting on his table. He sees the plate of food the maid left for him and complains that it is only mushrooms with no meat at all. Our hero wonders how the boy got so fat while eating such plain and tasteless food. But he remembers that despite all his problems, the young master had at least one single friend who was loyal to him. The next day, our hero decides to keep going with his regular morning training. Out in the yard, he begins to stretch his muscles to prepare his heavy body for some hard exercise. After doing just a little bit of movement, the boy is already breathing hard and completely out of breath. He cannot believe that his body feels so sore and tired just from doing a simple warm-up. Suddenly, the servant girl shows up and looks very surprised to see that he is already out of bed so early. Carrying a few items in her hands, she then asks him if he plans to practice his training again today. Feeling a little bit embarrassed, the young master answers yes, and the girl wishes him a good day. As she walks past him, the boy notices that the maid is holding his clothes. He asks her if those are his clothes, and the girl jumps a little bit because of his sudden question. She quickly apologizes for being late and explains that she accidentally fell asleep while waiting for him the night before. He thinks to himself that even though she cannot help him much, she is still his only true ally. The maid feels shocked because the young master suddenly walks up close to her, so she takes a small step back. Then he gently places his hand on her shoulder and thanks her for all her hard work and loyalty. Feeling completely panicked, the girl does not understand what he means by saying that. With a kind smile on his face, he says he is sorry and warns her that she will have a lot more work to do for a while. After saying that, the boy turns around and starts running through the yard again to keep going with his daily practice. The young woman just stands there, looking at her master with a very confused face and cheeks that are completely red. Night comes down once again, and the big full moon shines light over the entire celestial clan. But our hero does not take a break and keeps running through the dark yard, even during the late hours. His fat and heavy body can barely take the hard work, but he refuses to give up on his main goal. Sweat runs down his face, and he breathes with a lot of difficulty after taking every single step. He feels as if he might pass out because of the sharp pain moving through his whole body. At that exact moment, an old memory from his past life as Myong comes back to his mind. He remembers his old teacher shouting at him loudly during a very hard and painful training session. The teacher asks him if he really wanted to go to the New Year's party instead of working. Angrily, the man calls him ungrateful and commands him to practice the sword hit 100 times. His boss accuses him of being far too slow while the young man practices completely alone in the yard. Meanwhile, the little Cheon Riang was having a wonderful time with his dad at the Bright Lantern Parade. The young fighter wonders if he was ever allowed to choose anything for himself. He had no choice except to pay back the kindness of the leader who took him into the family. But unlike his past life, he can now make his own choices and decisions. With a big smile on his face, he thinks to himself that all of this is actually very fun. Hidden from view, the maid watches the young master as he runs with a lot of trouble through the yard. The girl has a very worried look on her face when she sees his bad physical condition. Suddenly, the boy cannot take the pressure anymore and falls straight down onto the ground from being too tired. She runs over quickly to help him up, and our hero realizes that the girl is actually much stronger than she looks. The days keep passing by, and the young man continues his hard training, even when it rains. The group of bullies watches him from a distance and complains about how he shows up every single day. One of them takes the money from a bet he won, because his friend bet that the fat boy would not show up to train. Feeling annoyed, the loser of the bet complains about the young master's silly and pathetic behavior. A friend tells him to be quiet, but he does not care if the boy hears his mean words. He keeps talking, saying that even if the young man becomes the main leader, he will never have any real power anyway. The bully explains that the Council of Elders and Commander Cheon Sunhak hold the real power, so the students only need to follow one of them and just ignore the young master. With the money settled, the group of bullies decides to leave the yard, complaining about the cold weather. But the leader of the bullies stays behind, looking at him with a face full of hate. He stares at our hero, who keeps running through the rain without stopping or caring. The bad guy thinks that the fat boy must be planning something secret to get his title as the next leader back. At that exact moment, the main character stops his run and stands right in front of the angry bully. The boy realizes that he heard every single word they said, but he is acting like nothing happened at all. From far away, the maid watches what is happening, feeling very worried about what might happen next. Holding the master's clean clothes in her hands, the maid looks at the bullies with a very brave and angry face. The girl looks totally mad now and seems fully ready to do something about it. After some time passes, the bright sun finally shines down on the Celestial Clan once again. In the middle of the practice field, we can see several wooden swords placed neatly on a wooden rack. With that sight, our hero walks over and picks up one of the weapons to begin a brand new type of training. Holding the sword tightly in his hand, the boy gets ready to practice his fighting moves. He then begins to practice the exact strikes he mastered in his past life as a warrior. With a happy smile on his face, he realizes his new body is finally moving the way it should. He now has enough physical stamina to lift a heavy sword, and he knows this will speed up the way his body takes in the magical elixirs. At another moment, the bully loses his temper with the maid and barks at her to take back what she just said. Watching the whole scene, the other students just stand around in a circle, observing the noisy argument. The young girl bravely defends her master and yells back at the attacker, telling him not to insult the Lord. Our main character feels quite surprised to see such a brave attitude from his only loyal friend. The bully becomes completely furious because of the girl's bold words and grabs her forcefully by the collar of her clothes. The attacker is mad at the maid's courage and commands her to repeat exactly what she said to him. Without showing any fear, the girl demands that he take back the mean words he directed at her young master. The rest of the students just watch silently as the bad guy gets more and more irritated by the entire situation. He cannot believe a simple housemaid has the guts to challenge him, and his mind is completely blinded by rage. But the young woman stays right where she is, standing firm and showing absolutely no fear of him. Tired of talking to her, the bully decides to pull out his actual weapon so he can threaten her life. He then tells her that he will place the sharp blade right against her neck to see if she changes her mind. But all of a sudden, an unexpected person appears out of nowhere and blocks the bad guy's attack. The bully is completely shocked and tries to understand exactly what just happened. Our hero steps right in front of the servant girl and keeps her safe by using his own sword to block the hit. The attacker feels very confused by the young master's sudden action and stares at him with total disbelief. With a very serious look on his face, the main character glares at the bully without saying a single word. The bad guy tries to stutter and make an excuse, but our hero stops him from talking right away. The main character then tells him that he should point his dangerous sword at the right person. He challenges the attacker to say all the mean things he wanted to say to the maid, but to say them directly to his face instead. With his weapon pointed forward, the young man challenges him to settle their problems using their swords. The bully cannot believe what is happening and asks if he is really being challenged to a proper fight. With a small smile, our hero repeats the word duel to himself in a thoughtful way. Then he makes the challenge even bigger and asks what his enemy thinks about having a real life-or-death battle. The young man proposes that if the bully wins the fight, he will never walk into the practice field ever again. The maid feels completely shocked by her master's dangerous choice and calls out his title loudly. The bully yells back that the young master hasn't even touched a sword in a whole month and tries to make him stop. With one single powerful swing, the young master breaks a wooden sword into 2 clean pieces, leaving the maid completely speechless with surprise. With a very serious look, our hero says he can easily ignore mean words against himself, but he states clearly that he will never accept insults against a person who truly cares about him. He says this is his strong belief and challenges the bully to start the fight. The attacker hesitates for a moment and asks if the young master really promises to fight him, and our hero says yes. Having no other choice left, the enemy accepts the challenge and gets ready for the battle. He truly believes that his own physical strength and speed are much better, and that the fat boy has absolutely no chance to win against him. With a cold look in his eyes, our hero fearlessly faces the bad guy, knowing exactly how to deal with a scoundrel. A strange and powerful energy begins to come out from the young master as he stands in front of his opponent. The bully feels terrified by this sudden power and wonders what this strange spirit is. With a very angry look, the main character grinds his teeth together and asks if his enemy is feeling scared now. The attacker takes a small step backward, and our hero warns him that if he does not move to attack, then he will start. The main character charges forward at the bully with great speed and no hesitation. With a wicked smile, the enemy says it was a good try, but tells him he is far too slow. Suddenly, the two swords hit each other with a bright flash of light, and bright sparks fly everywhere through the air. The loud sound of metal hitting metal rings out through the yard, and the heavy force of the blow takes the attacker by total surprise. Because of the incredible power behind the hit, the bully's sword flies right out of his hand, leaving him completely without a weapon. The main character points the tip of his sword at the enemy, who stands there in total shock, not understanding how he lost so quickly. The enemy wonders if the young master's target from the very beginning was not his body, but his weapon. He then questions what kind of sword technique was used and wonders when this useless guy became so strong. But our hero reminds him that this was a serious life-or-death battle and tells him he was simply careless. With those words, the beaten attacker drops down onto his knees on the ground, and the main character calls him pathetic. The young master tells him that he does not deserve to hold a weapon while others are watching. We can see that our hero's own hand is bleeding a little bit from the heavy impact of the clash. He then tells his enemy to sit and think deeply about the true reason why he holds a sword in his hand, and tells him to come back only when he finds that answer. Kneeling on the ground, the bully thinks about the winner's deep words and his own reasons for fighting. Now that the duel is completely finished, the main character calls his servant girl so they can leave the field together. The defeated fighter is left behind in absolute shock, staring down at his empty hand and failing to accept his sudden loss. His entire hand trembles as he realizes that he lost not only the actual duel, but also his personal honor in front of the crowd. Resting on his knees, he watches the young master walk away calmly with the servant girl right by his side. Once they return to his private room, the maid immediately begins to apologize for getting involved in the trouble earlier. She states that she shouldn't have stepped forward and caused that massive argument on the practice field. Our hero listens to her apology in complete silence while holding his sword tightly. The young girl clarifies that she felt extremely upset seeing the other students make fun of his hard work and dedication. With her face looking down at the floor, she says she is deeply sorry that he injured his hand because of her actions. He remarks to himself that the damage was actually from using a combat technique far too powerful for his weak frame, and tells her it wasn't her fault at all. Startled by this, the young woman raises her head up and looks at her master, completely puzzled by his gentle reaction. Then he states once more that he will never stand by when people who care about him are insulted. With a smile on his face, he adds that to protect his people, he won't tolerate any offense, no matter how strong the opponent is. The maid's eyes grow wide upon hearing her master's wonderful words. At that exact moment, the girl suddenly recalls a New Year's wish the young master had made a long time ago in the past. Back then, the little boy said he would grow up to be a clan chief as powerful as an elephant to keep everyone safe, promising that he would start his sword training the very next morning. The tiny master then assured the maid that even though she was currently taller than him, he would still protect her from danger, which caused a happy tear to run down the young woman's face back then. Back in the present time, the girl cries with true happiness seeing his incredible change in behavior. She understands right now that this is the true master she used to know and respect so deeply. All of a sudden, a mysterious voice speaks out from the shadows, questioning if he can truly take responsibility for those proud words. The young master feels puzzled and looks toward the maid, not knowing where this sudden voice came from. With a very serious face, he turns around to face the owner of the mysterious voice that just appeared. The visitor steps forward, revealing himself as the young master's uncle, who happens to be one of the three main pillars of the Cayenne family. This man is also the Grandmaster who teaches the famous Heavenly Dragon and Heavenly Phoenix sword bodies. The warrior, named Cheon Clan, asks the exact same question again with a very cold and strict expression on his face. Our hero gives him a respectful greeting and apologizes for being ignorant by not coming to visit his quarters sooner. A flash from his past life comes back to his mind, and he remembers this dangerous man clearly, but the uncle calls him worthless and tells him to stop wasting precious moments and answer the question immediately. He notices right away that his uncle's harsh behavior is exactly the same as 15 years ago when the man labeled him a complete failure. Holding his weapon tightly, the boy states that keeping his people safe is his core belief, and he takes full responsibility for it. The uncle laughs out loud in a very mocking way, making fun of his nephew's claims about having a conviction and protecting others. Then, his eyes notice the specific movement used in the fight, recognizing it as the hidden dragon's claw technique. The older man states that because this move is a highly guarded family secret, the young man could have only learned it from a hidden traitor. In an angry voice, he promises to track down and heavily punish that traitor, along with anyone else who assisted him. Our hero understands instantly that this is just a fake reason to ban him from using the training grounds for the rest of his life. With that thought, the young master gets ready to give his reply with extreme caution. The uncle glares at his nephew with pure hatred, waiting eagerly for him to speak. The boy knows he must select his words with great care, so he won't get trapped in a worse situation. Then he finally speaks up, telling his uncle that there is absolutely no traitor inside the family. Feeling confused, the Grandmaster is shocked by his nephew's surprising response. The boy explains that he merely copied the difficult movement after seeing it performed by accident just one single time. Hearing this silly excuse, the uncle lets out a mean, dark laugh, completely refusing to believe a word of it. The man then begins to laugh very loudly, finding the young man's story completely crazy and foolish. Holding his weapon ready, he says this talk is nonsense and gets himself fully prepared to strike. Without waiting another second, the Grandmaster leaps forward to launch a direct attack at his nephew. He shouts that a weak boy like him could never copy a secret art like that, and challenges him on the spot. Our hero feels nervous but grips his sword tightly, getting ready to face the danger. A frightening red aura of power starts to flow heavily from the Grandmaster's body. The boy tells him that if he still doubts his words, he should perform a different technique right now so he can copy that one too. Hearing this incredibly brave challenge, the Grandmaster is left completely speechless and frozen in shock. Red blood keeps dripping down from the young master's wounded hand, but he completely refuses to run away or give up on the challenge. The uncle screams at him, saying he is just telling lies to escape from punishment, and states that he doesn't trust a single thing he says. With those words, he turns away and calls the boy's maid over to cross-examine her about the whole situation. He then orders the girl to tell him exactly what kind of secret plot her master is planning behind closed doors. With a very fierce expression, the top master warns her that if she has the nerve to tell him a lie, he will strike her down right on the spot without a second thought, leaving the young woman completely terrified. The servant girl's face turns totally white, and cold sweat drops down her face because of pure fear. With her hands shaking badly, she tries her best to find the right words to give him an answer. She then explains to him that during the entire past month, the young lord has been smiling through the whole time. We catch a glimpse of the maid watching her master closely, who smiles with great pride due to his own hard work. The uncle feels completely puzzled by this statement, and angrily questions what she truly means by those words. He wonders to himself how that annoying brat who always lost his temper could ever have a smile on his face. Stuttering nervously, the young woman confirms that he has truly changed his whole behavior over the last few days. In secret, she recalls watching the boy practice his routines with a happy smile spread across his face. She states that even while he was running across the practice grounds, the young master kept smiling. The boy was smiling with true happiness because he was putting effort into his own life for the very first time. Our hero then speaks up and says that he noticed everything and perfectly understands the girl's deep care for him. He explains to them that he felt happy to work hard for his own sake, and that feeling gave him a strong motivation. The maid keeps talking, saying that even when the other students made fun of him, he did not care at all. And for the first time in his life, he pulled out his weapon not because of blind rage, but to keep her safe from danger. With a voice full of deep feeling, the maid states that her master has truly transformed, and she believes in him with all her heart. The Grandmaster listens closely to the young girl's words and thinks deeply about his nephew's supposed change. With a thoughtful expression on his face, he seems to finally look at the chance that he might actually be wrong about the boy. The uncle demands to know what kind of martial art style he is practicing, and the boy replies that it is the art of the heavenly sun. Hearing this, the Grandmaster holds up 2 fingers and states that he will give him a strict deadline of 2 months. He then challenges the boy to beat the best student in 2 months to show everyone his true value. With a very sharp stare, the older man asks if his nephew has what it takes to finish this hard challenge. Our hero thinks to himself that his uncle used to test his limits exactly this way in his past life. But with a very confident smile on his face, he answers back that just 1 single month is more than enough time for him. The Grandmaster stays completely quiet for a brief moment, highly surprised by this brave and bold reply. His hand rests gently on the handle of his weapon as he stares directly at the young master. Then the uncle accepts this daring bet and says, "So be it," before turning around to walk away from the area. With a winning smile, the boy stands there watching his uncle walk away very slowly. After that, he turns back to the maid and tells her that they should head back to the quarters. But the girl looks confused. The main character then says with a big smile that he still needs to practice running just a little bit more. The maid smiles back at him, feeling extremely happy with her master's strong willpower, and watches him walk away with great admiration. 2 weeks pass by quickly, and our main character keeps up his intense practice routines without taking a single break. Out in the training courtyard, he displays great agility as he repeats his sword techniques over and over. He reasons to himself that he has managed to clear away almost all of the negative energy, yet a small part of it still slows him down. The young boy feels deep regret that he cannot access the family library to discover a superior cultivation method. While thinking about this, he stares down at his palm and wishes his blocked energy center could simply recover on its own. Meanwhile, a few nearby students remark among themselves that the top disciple has a perfect opportunity to completely crush the young master. One of them tells the others to lower their voices, fearing the Lord might overhear them and quit the match before it even begins. The other student suspects that spreading these whispers was actually the Grandmaster's plan all along, hoping to force the young man into backing down. However, our hero catches every single word of their chat, and a very serious expression appears on his face. Not far away, another pack of bullies laughs mockingly, claiming the young master cannot even tell the difference between a real weapon and a farming tool. All of a sudden, the main character steps forward and demands to know if they have a funny joke they would care to share with him. With a cold stare, he looks the group's leader directly in the eyes and asks if he is indeed the #1 disciple. The older boy feels a bit startled by the young master's sudden approach and simply glares back at him. He then takes a seat and proudly confirms his position as the top disciple, but advises the young master not to stress himself over their upcoming battle. The main character gets a strange feeling that he recognizes this face from somewhere and demands to know the boy's name. Wearing a cocky smirk, the disciple introduces himself as Lee Sukji while crossing his arms over his chest. The moment he hears that specific name, our hero is completely frozen in shock as a sudden flash of memory returns to his mind. He remembers with absolute clarity that this exact individual was the secret traitor who passed vital information over to the demonic cult. Grinding his teeth together in pure anger, the boy realizes he is finally standing face to face with the person responsible for his family's ultimate destruction. The deceitful traitor remarks that it is a true privilege to be remembered by the Lord, and our hero simply turns around to walk away from him. The young master reflects that he originally intended to just do his absolute best, but now he has completely changed his mind. With deep hatred burning in his eyes, he makes a silent vow that this wretched backstabber will pay dearly for every single thing he has done. Another 2 weeks pass by, and the scheduled day for the massive duel between the two fighters finally arrives. Gathering around the arena, some people in the crowd whisper that they cannot wait to watch the young master get totally destroyed. Suddenly, a loud voice rings out, commanding everyone to fall silent because the match is about to commence. The announcer then proclaims that the battle arranged directly by the Grandmaster is ready to start and calls both opponents forward. Seated upon his grand throne, the protagonist's uncle summons the challenger, Lee Suk-ji, to step into the fighting ring. The hidden traitor walks up the steps and enters the stage, wearing a highly confident smile across his face. Holding his wooden practice sword firmly, the rival turns around to face the spectators, looking incredibly self-assured. Next, the announcer calls out the name of the remaining challenger, our main character, Cheon Riang. But to the absolute surprise of everyone present, the young master does not appear, leaving the announcer completely puzzled. The man looks around frantically through the dense crowd, but he cannot spot the boy anywhere. The spectators begin to murmur among themselves, wondering if the heavy boy got too scared and fled from the challenge. One of the nearby disciples lets out a mocking laugh, pointing out that the young lord is nowhere to be found. With that, all the other martial artists join in, laughing out loud and making fun of the cowardly young master. Watching this chaotic scene unfold, the uncle wears a highly displeased look on his face, while the traitor smiles with a look of total victory. But out of nowhere, a mysterious voice declares that Cheon Riang has arrived, taking the rival completely by surprise. The Grandmaster is also startled by the sudden shout and turns his head to see exactly where the voice originated. Far in the distance, we see our hero walking smoothly toward the fighting ring, with his loyal maid walking right beside him. The boy walks up the stairs with total calmness and prepares himself to enter the arena. The spectators feel deeply confused because they fail to recognize him at all, wondering what happened to the heavy boy from before. Then it suddenly hits them that this young man, who now possesses a highly impressive physique, is actually the young master himself. Showing a serious and self-assured expression, the boy introduces himself properly and states that he has just made his arrival. Every single person is left completely stunned by this radical physical change, wondering how on earth he managed to drop so much weight in a month. The boy then looks up toward the high balcony, where his uncle is observing him with a very stern expression. Weapon in hand, he offers a respectful bow and apologizes to the Grandmaster for keeping him waiting. However, the older man tells him to drop the useless formalities and bluntly asks if he is truly prepared for what is coming. With a highly confident smile, the young master replies that he is absolutely ready and takes his stance for the fight to begin. At that exact moment, the two rivals stand face to face in the center of the stadium, waiting for the signal to strike. The rival thinks to himself that it is completely laughable for the young lord to face him after only a single month of training. The traitor then wonders what kind of plan the Grandmaster had in mind when he allowed this match to take place. It is then that he notices the powerful captains of the Heavenly Dragon and Phoenix squads are also present, watching the whole event unfold. With that, the rival decides he will use this perfect chance to leave a great impression on the leaders. Our hero notices right away that his opponent is already planning how to please his superiors. He thinks to himself that his rival is nothing but a rotten parasite who always clings to power just to get ahead in life. The protagonist remembers that after entering the Heavenly Dragon's sword corps in his past life, the traitor got close to the rulers through politics rather than his actual skill with the sword, and blinded by pure greed, he sold out all the clan's vital information to the demonic cult back then. The boy recalls that when he finally realized the truth it was already too late, but this time he will judge him properly. He reflects that the rival has not committed that terrible crime yet in this timeline, and that is exactly why he needs to be stopped right now. Meanwhile, the traitor thinks to himself that everything has gone perfectly, and that is the reason he became the #1 apprentice. But our hero thinks that his rival's good luck has officially run out, since he knows all of his dirty secrets. With a confident smile on his face, He declares that his opponent's career is going to end right here today. The announcer then shouts to the crowd that the fight will continue until he calls a stop, clarifying that it is not a duel to the death. With that warning, the two opponents prepare themselves for combat with their wooden weapons in hand. The traitor glares over at the young master with a very mocking smile spread across his face. The Grandmaster then yells out loudly for the duel to finally begin once and for all. Without wasting a single second, the protagonist charges straight toward his opponent, but the rival quickly dodges the attack and gets ready for a counterattack with a smirk. With a powerful downward swing, the traitor tries to strike the young master with his full physical force. He then mentions that he heard all about the bizarre technique the boy used to win his last fight. With a nasty laugh, the rival changes his fighting stance and challenges him to try that same trick on him if he dares. Our hero then advances forward to attack again, wearing a very serious and determined expression. The rival challenges him to try and rip the weapon right out of his hand if he is actually able to do it. Suddenly, the two wooden swords clash together with an impressive amount of force. The heavy impact of the blow sends bright sparks flying, and the two warriors glare at each other with pure hatred in their eyes. The protagonist feels surprised by his opponent's raw strength while the rival grinds his teeth together. The two fighters are locked in a tough struggle of power right in the middle of the arena. With a quick and agile move, our hero backs away and immediately begins a new sequence of strikes. The boy then attacks his enemy with a series of incredibly fast and precise movements. With a highly focused gaze, he continues to put pressure on his rival using his quick actions. The young master then spins his body and attacks with all of his remaining strength in a final heavy blow. The rival mocks him, saying he originally intended to show some mercy for the sake of the young master's pride, but he claims he cannot waste this great chance to show off in front of the Grandmaster. The rival tells him not to hate him too much for this, as the boy grinds his teeth in sharp pain. Suddenly, our hero's wooden sword snaps completely in two from the heavy force of the blow. With his guard totally down, the traitor seizes the perfect opportunity and grabs his opponent's wrist tightly. Then he uses his foot to trip the young master up and throw him completely off balance. Our protagonist loses his footing and starts to fall down toward the ground, left totally defenseless. But with a lightning-fast reaction, he manages to recover his stance and avoids the fall at the very last second. With a determined look, the boy faces his opponent again, refusing to let himself be shaken by the setback. A strange pink aura of power begins to flow out from the traitor's body as he gets ready to deliver a final strike. With a wicked smile, he tells the young master to watch his movements very carefully. The rival then uses his own secret technique to attack the protagonist with absolutely everything he has. Our hero is taken by surprise by the incredible speed and strength of this unexpected attack. A rapid flurry of heavy blows hits the young master, who seems to have no possible way to defend himself. The traitor then begins to boast out loud about the massive difference in level between the two warriors. With that final hit, the protagonist falls hard to the ground, apparently defeated by the overwhelming force of the attack. The rival says it was a bit of a shame to fight such a useless scoundrel, but notes it served its purpose to showcase his own skills. With a victorious smile, he then raises his fist high in the air in celebration. The traitor tells himself that everything went exactly as he planned and prepares to receive applause from the audience. But he suddenly finds the absolute silence around the arena very strange and wonders why he cannot hear any cheering. Puzzled, he looks around the stadium and realizes that the training ground seems to be turned completely sideways. The rival then realizes to his horror that he is actually the one lying flat on the ground, with a broken piece of wood stuffed inside his mouth. The rival wonders what on earth just happened and notices a boot slowly approaching his face. With that sight, he realizes the young master is standing right in front of him, completely fine. With a mocking smile, the protagonist asks his rival if he enjoyed having a good nap on the floor. Not understanding a single thing, the beaten attacker wonders why he is the one lying down on the ground. Then he notices that his body refuses to move at all, and he falls into a state of total panic. Completely paralyzed, the traitor is left lying flat in the arena, totally unable to move his limbs. Right next to his body, the young lord spots the shattered pieces of his wooden weapon. Suddenly, a sharp flash of memory returns to the loser's mind, and he finally remembers the whole truth of what happened. He recalls that he was actually the one who got aggressively attacked by the young master. Our hero's sword had clashed hard with his own and instantly shattered it into tiny pieces. The boy then remembers with horror that his weapon had already been completely destroyed before he knew it. With wide eyes, the rival recalls the exact second of his brutal defeat. The protagonist had used a powerful technique that pulverized the traitor's sword, and with that same single blow, he hit his opponent square in the face. The raw force of the attack was so massive that the rival flew backward through the air with no way to react. Back in the present moment, the traitor finally understands that he was completely and utterly defeated. He simply cannot believe he lost a fight to someone like that useless, heavy boy from before. Our hero then looks down and calls him a potential traitor, leaving the rival deeply confused by the strange title. With a very serious look, he warns him to be extremely careful because he will be keeping a close eye on his actions from now on. The loser tries to justify his failure to himself, thinking he just lowered his guard for a split second. Lying helpless on the floor, the rival wonders what he should do to save himself now. Our hero stands tall beside him while the traitor truly believes that his reputation is completely ruined. The entire crowd stays in absolute shock, wondering if this major fight really ended with just a single blow. With tears welling up in her eyes, the maid watches the whole thing and calls out for her young master with pride. The protagonist then turns his face toward his uncle, who is observing him closely from the upper balcony. The Grandmaster looks right back down at him with a very stern and serious expression on his face. With that heavy silence, the young master remains standing right next to his fallen opponent inside the arena. The boy's uncle continues to stare down at him with a cold look, saying absolutely nothing to the crowd. Our hero then stares right back up at him with an expression of pure, unshakable determination. The entire crowd of spectators is dead silent, deeply shocked by the unexpected outcome of this duel. Up on the balcony, one of the squad captains clenches his fists tightly, showing his deep anger at the result. He then complains to himself that the fool completely ruined their perfect chance to expel the young master from the clan. With hatred burning in his eyes, the man grinds his teeth together and thinks to himself that this situation is very irritating. In a quick mental flash, we see the exact moment the protagonist kicked his opponent away. The traitor then falls defeated onto the ground, with his wooden sword completely broken to pieces. Our hero stands over his fallen rival with an expression of natural superiority, looking like a king on a throne. The Grandmaster just observes the whole scene play out below with his arms crossed tightly over his chest. The crowd then begins to murmur, wondering if the young man used some kind of dirty trick to win the match. The beaten boy thinks that, with this sudden victory, that rich scoundrel will become even more conceited than before. The boy's uncle then looks down at him with a highly suspicious gaze, trying to understand the secret behind what just happened. The uncle finally stands up from his seat and prepares to announce the grand winner of the match to everyone. But before he can speak, our hero shouts out to the crowd, stating that he knows all about the deep grievances they hold against him. Hearing this bold statement, the Grandmaster gets an incredibly serious expression on his face. The boy openly acknowledges that the terrible mistakes he made in his past life cannot be erased. While his uncle glares down at him angrily, the maid seems quite worried about what he might say next. He tells the gathered crowd that he does not remember the faces of every single person he has wronged, and he claims that those mean acts were committed by the old Cheon Clan, not by his current self. Even so, he states that he will willingly bear the punishment for all those past sins. With that declaration, the young man clenches his fist with great physical force and determination. He then turns fully to the crowd and loudly says that from now on, he is the new Cheon Clan. The boy then offers a deep apology for all his outrageous and cruel behavior in the past. With those words, he bows his body in a sincere apology to every single person present in the courtyard. With his back turned to the main balcony, he remains bowed low as a true sign of deep repentance. The other apprentices watch this scene completely shocked and without any reaction. With eyes full of happy tears, the loyal maid watches her master with immense pride. The Grandmaster also seems quite surprised by his nephew's totally unexpected attitude change. After finishing his apology, the young master stands back up straight and faces the crowd once again. He then announces that if this bow is not enough to satisfy their anger, he challenges them to come find him at the training ground at any time because he will always be there waiting. With a highly confident look, the boy turns to the side, showing his brand new determination to everyone. The Grandmaster watches the entire scene wrap up in total silence, showing no visible reaction on his face. With that final word, our hero calls his maid over so they can leave the arena together. The uncle then becomes highly thoughtful and seems to be reflecting deeply on everything that just happened today. Above them, we see a clear blue sky with the bright sun shining down through the green leaves. The boy gently thanks the girl for holding his sword earlier, and she replies happily that holding the weapon gave her all the strength she needed. He then asks for his weapon back, but the young woman looks surprised and demands to know why. Our hero feels quite puzzled by the girl's sudden reaction and looks over at her, failing to understand. The maid tightly hugs the sword to her chest and explains that she really needs to keep Little Heaven just a little longer. The protagonist is left completely speechless, failing to comprehend the strange nickname she just gave to his weapon. Suddenly, a deep voice speaks out from behind, questioning him about what exactly he was attempting to cut, which makes the boy turn around. The young man then walks closer to the main building, where his uncle is observing him from the high balcony. Wearing a small smile, he thinks to himself that he never imagined hearing those specific words ever again. The uncle demands to know why he does not ask what the boy himself truly desired to slice with his blade. Our hero then replies with a calm smile that his true target was the sky. With a highly confident expression, he declares that his ultimate goal was to slice the sky itself. The Grandmaster is left completely shocked by his nephew's totally unexpected response. With a very serious face, the older man thinks that such an idea is completely ridiculous and absurd. The warrior reflects that this was the exact path he pursued during his entire life, and now his own nephew finally understands it. With that realization, the uncle admits that the boy won their bet and promises to grant him one single wish. The young man immediately asks for permission to enter the Grand Library of the Heavenly Dragon, but his uncle firmly denies the request. The boy becomes highly thoughtful, realizing his primary plan has just gone completely down the drain. Then a new idea pops into his mind, and he asks for permission to train with exactly one person per day. The uncle feels quite surprised by this odd request and asks if that is truly all he wants from him. With a confident smile, the boy confirms it and states that there is absolutely no better training than real battlefield combat. The Grandmaster stares at him for a brief moment, appearing to consider the bold proposal. Then the uncle turns his back and remarks that his nephew will surely grow stronger with each passing day. Holding his wooden weapon firmly, the boy says that is exactly what he is hoping for. Now that the agreement is sealed, the Grandmaster leaves the area, leaving the two of them behind. The maid curiously asks what he meant by cutting the sky, but he simply smiles and tells her it is a secret. The very next day, a fresh morning begins to break over the Heavenly Clan's estate. Out on the field, one of the bullies kicks the dirt in pure anger and complains that this whole situation is incredibly annoying. He complains that the young master is becoming far too arrogant just because he got lucky a single time, but the group's leader believes that this outcome might actually turn out to be a good thing for them. In the end, the angry fighter holds his weapon tightly, then he unsheathes his blade with a look full of dark intentions. The bright reflection on the metal blade makes him remember a specific event from the past involving the former master. He recalls the fat young master causing terrible trouble around the city streets, just like he always did. Back then, the former heir proudly introduced himself as the great young master of the powerful Cheon family. The bully and his companions were enjoying themselves at an expensive tavern entirely thanks to the young master's presence. One of his friends advised him back then not to get involved because he could easily get into deep trouble. The old fat master was shouting in a furious rage, demanding to know if they thought he was some kind of joke on the floor. A nearby servant was trying hard to warn him that it was highly dangerous, begging him to step back. Suddenly, The sword's blade moved at an incredible speed through the air. With that swift motion, the weapon struck the bully's face, who was left completely shocked by the sudden wound. The boy's blood began to flow quickly, dripping down onto the tavern floorboards. The heavy boy then questioned him for getting in his direct path, and the bully angrily called him a complete idiot. With a bleeding mouth, the attacker glared back at his opponent with immense hatred burning in his eyes. The former master accused him of merely faking the injury and loudly ordered him to get out of his sight. Back in the present moment, the attacker's reflection on the shiny blade displays all of his current rage. He then makes a solemn vow to leave that exact same physical wound on the protagonist's face, making it look like a complete accident during practice. Next, we see the young master leaping down from an incredible height while preparing a devastating sword strike. He descends through the air with amazing agility, focusing every bit of his physical strength into a single downward attack. Wearing an extremely serious expression, the protagonist perfectly performs the difficult vertical slash technique. Observing the scene from a short distance away, a big guy with a scarred face becomes absolutely furious for being completely ignored by the boy. At that exact moment, the brute grinds his teeth together in a quiet rage because absolutely no one paid him any attention. Meanwhile, the boy's loyal assistant arrives on the field, serving some warm tea to help calm the tense situation down. The grumpy warrior feels deeply confused by her sudden kindness and stares blankly at the young woman, completely failing to understand what is going on. With a peaceful smile, she explains to him that her master enters a state of total trance whenever he begins to train hard. The big man then asks if she is the exact servant that the master protected during that legendary duel. The lovely girl maintains her polite posture and looks straight at the visitor while holding the tray of snacks. He remains highly suspicious of them but agrees to observe the situation a little more calmly. With that, the young woman shows an incredible amount of determination in her eyes, proving she has absolute faith in her lord. The two of them stand together in the courtyard talking, while the new leader continues his exhausting routine in the background. She admits she is quite worried because the young lord has been pushing his body weight too hard lately. The fighter curiously asks why she is so dedicated to him, since the old master used to be a truly horrible person to everyone. Even so, the young woman states firmly that the leader has truly changed his ways and now seeks to fix every single one of his past mistakes. With great hope in her voice, she says she completely believes in the new purpose in life that the young master has chosen for himself. Taking a slow sip of his tea, the man admits he really does feel something totally different in the boy's current behavior. At that exact moment, he notices that the young lord just keeps repeating the same jumping downward slash over and over again all day long. But upon taking a much closer look, the veteran warrior notices that there is something incredibly powerful hidden deep within that simple routine. He realizes that the young master's foot position remains always identical with every strike. On top of that, the exact height of the sword and even the tight strength of his grip are repeated with an almost absurd perfection. Seeing this level of skill, the man wonders how that reckless boy ever managed to achieve such a high level of mastery in so short a time. Then, carefully analyzing the blade's quick trajectory, he notices that all of the heavy strikes go in the exact same direction. With this sudden realization, the veteran turns completely pale with fear as he finally understands the true purpose behind the training. Deeply desperate, he wonders if the boy had actually been aiming his weapon directly at him the entire time. The blade then stops just a few short inches away from his face, leaving the brute in a state of absolute shock. With his whole body completely on edge, the warrior looks up at the sky, trying hard to process the terrifying situation. He simply does not understand how the young lord was already pointing the deadly weapon at him before their fight even officially began. Just then, the hero finishes his routine and politely apologizes for making his visitor wait for so long. He then introduces himself and greets the veteran warrior by his proper name, calling him Cha-myung-hak. Startled by this, the man demands to know how the young master could possibly know his private name. The boy calmly explains that one day, he will become an official leader of the family, so he made sure to memorize the name. Myung-hak becomes even more confused by the young boy's dedication to memorizing the names of every single one of the apprentices. But the protagonist quickly notices the deep scar on his rival's face and asks if he was the one who originally caused that injury. Wearing a furious look, the veteran confirms that he was indeed the one, making the surrounding mood instantly very tense. The young lord understands that it was the body's previous owner who caused this damage, which is exactly why he didn't remember it himself. So he lowers his weapon and gets ready to apologize for a crime he didn't personally commit. With a gesture of deep respect, the boy bows his body low and apologizes for a past mistake that can never be erased. From a short distance away, we see the protagonist sincerely saying sorry, while the loyal maid and the warrior watch the scene unfold. The veteran is completely shocked because the old young master never once admitted his mistakes and always blamed other people for his failures. He then wonders to himself if this person bowing in apology before him is truly the same cruel person from before. With that thought, the warrior picks up his teacup and finally admits to himself that he has been completely defeated. The man then speaks out and says he lost their match today, even though their duel has not officially started yet. But he promises that next time he will prepare himself much better and challenge the young lord once again. With that said, the veteran turns his back and walks away from the yard, leaving the two of them behind, looking quite confused. The hero wonders if his apology was truly accepted, since he thought he saw the guy give a slight smile. However, the maid completely disagrees and states that the warrior did not smile at all. Ignoring her comment, the young master calls his faithful servant by her name and says he has a very important request to make. He then asks the young woman to write down on a piece of paper every single mistake he has ever made in his life, without forgetting a single detail. The girl gets very worried by this, but the boy firmly insists that she must write down all the pain and suffering he put her through in the past. With a highly determined look, he states that this is the true beginning of correcting his life and a heavy burden that he must carry. Starting the very next day, the daily duels finally began to take place out in the training courtyard. One of the angry apprentices then charges forward with his weapon, yelling that this fight is true retribution for all of his past sins. Fearlessly, our hero leaps high into the air to meet the challenger with his wooden sword. With one powerful strike, the young lord's weapon lands a direct and heavy hit right on the opponent's head. The apprentice then falls hard to the ground, completely defeated, with his broken wooden weapon lying right beside him. The protagonist then compliments his effort and tells him they should definitely fight again whenever they get another chance. But most of the challengers were quickly defeated in a single exchange of blows, and absolutely no one could beat the young master. Standing on the side, the servant girl jots down the score with a victorious smile on her face, showing off a very long list of continuous wins. One of the apprentices who was easily defeated wears a very thoughtful expression on his face. He remembers exactly how cruel the young master used to be in the past and reflects on how completely different he is right now. With a sense of deep respect, he then turns around and leaves the courtyard. In the end, the young lord's scoreboard showed that he was still completely undefeated with 6 straight victories. Meanwhile, in another part of the estate, we see the protagonist meditating quietly inside his room. He is sitting right by the window, trying hard to control the flow of internal energy within his body. The boy realizes that the negative energy is still blocking his main meridians and slowing down the movement of his Kwai. Because of this issue, even though he has a huge amount of stored energy, he cannot use it properly during a fight. He then understands that his current martial arts style is far too weak and he urgently needs something much stronger. But a strange, bothering feeling begins to trouble his mind, as if he is forgetting something incredibly important. Suddenly, the boy has a sharp revelation and goes into a state of total panic. He gets up from his seat in a massive hurry because he just remembered that the head of the family returns to the estate today. He feels highly anxious to see the powerful man who kindly took him in when he had absolutely no one left in the world. Dressed in his finest formal clothes, the young master prepares himself for this major meeting. At that exact moment, he wonders to himself if he should officially call the head of the family his father. But suddenly, another servant comes running into the room, calling out for him in a desperate voice. He recognizes the young girl right away and demands to know what happened to his main servant. The girl explains through her tears that her friend is currently in deep trouble with the young master's fiancé. Upon hearing this terrible news, our hero is completely shocked, not knowing what he should do. In another room of the palace, we see a messy table with food scattered all over the floorboards. On the cold floor, the maid trembles with pure fear, with spilled food surrounding her entire body. She apologizes desperately over and over again, while the fiancé looks down at her own expensive clothes, which are now badly stained with dark sauce. With a cold and highly arrogant look, the fiancé stares at the poor girl without showing a single shred of pity. Surrounded by several armed guards, the maid remains flat on the floor, begging them for forgiveness. With her face pressed down, she looks completely desperate about the terrible things that might happen to her. But the noble woman remarks that a simple apology will never clean her ruined garments. Hiding her face behind a fancy fan, she coldly orders her men to handle the matter according to their law. With that command, one of the guards steps forward with a very menacing look on his face. The man then draws his weapon from its sheath, preparing to heavily punish the young servant girl. He raises the sharp blade high in the air as the girl trembles in fear on the floor beneath him. Feeling totally desperate, the other servant runs into the room, screaming loudly to try and prevent the tragedy from happening. But the guard does not care at all, and his weapon begins to glow with a powerful, dangerous energy. Suddenly, our hero leaps down from above and blocks the heavy strike at the very last second. The fiancée and her guard are completely shocked by the young master's totally unexpected appearance. Wearing a very serious expression, the boy lands firmly on the ground, protecting his faithful servant with his own body. The remaining guards feel deeply confused by the scene and fail to understand exactly what is happening. He then demands to know what on earth they think they are doing to his personal maid. One of the men questions his authority, asking how he dares to interfere in the private affairs of the powerful Cheon Clan. Showing a highly confident look, he introduces himself proudly as the young master of the Cheon family. The noble woman then offers a polite apology and mentions that she came all the way from the Sichuan Tang clan for their scheduled meeting. Wearing a mysterious smile, she introduces herself properly as Tang Soi. Our hero then recalls with bitterness that in his past life, this exact woman was his wife. She was widely known across the land as the Ice Flower because of her cold, calculating beauty. The previous head of the Cheon family had proposed this marriage because the Tang clan promised to heal the boy's weak body. The Tang clan had accepted the marriage deal solely to fulfill their dark ambition of expanding their own territory. That is exactly why the young woman arrived today already dressed for a wedding and accepted their first meeting so easily. After the wedding took place in the past, the head of the family showed great weakness whenever he dealt with the Tang clan. They took full advantage of that weak situation, and that marriage became the true beginning of the family's ultimate fall. Back in the present time, the boy faces his fiancée, already fully aware of her whole evil plan. He repeats his question firmly and asks what she was trying to do to his helpless servant. The woman points over to the dark stain on her dress with a highly mocking expression. She then states that she was merely punishing the clumsy maid who soiled her expensive clothes. The hero feels absolutely furious that she would try to take a life for such a trivial and silly reason. But the fiancé remarks that he only cares about the servant and fails to see the rare type of clothes she was wearing. With that thought, she suggests that the young girl could actually be a dangerous assassin in disguise. The boy yells back that her claim is completely ridiculous and reminds her that in the Cheon family, they follow their own laws. Wielding his sword firmly, he states that her false claim is a direct insult to his family name and his people. One of her guards speaks up, saying the young master is the one insulting the supreme law of the Tang clan. With a wicked smile on her face, the young woman declares that she will apply her own law regardless, and challenges him to stop her right there. One of her strong henchmen releases a powerful aura from his body, preparing to launch an attack. Our hero is quite surprised to see the opponent's sword aura, which shines incredibly brightly. With that motion, the two blades clash together in a sudden flash of bright sparks and pure energy. The boy is left in complete shock by his rival's raw strength and feels an enormous amount of physical pressure pushing down on him. Then, The protagonist is forced backward by the guard's overwhelming power. The other servant girl shouts her master's name out loud, deeply worried about the dangerous situation unfolding before her. But the fiancé just stands there watching the struggle with a mocking smile, quietly holding a very thin needle between her fingers. This hidden needle in her hand strongly suggests that she might have some dirty trick up her sleeve to use at any moment. With that advantage, the Tang family guard gets ready for a fresh attack using his powerful sword aura. The henchman charges forward with full physical force, and our hero struggles hard to defend himself against the rapid series of heavy blows. He realizes instantly that his enemy is incredibly strong and must be a highly trained, first-class warrior. Once again, their two weapons meet in mid-air and create a sudden explosion of bright, bluish light. The young master understands perfectly that his rival's internal and external energy is far superior to his own, so he quickly changes his stance and prepares to execute a completely new combat strategy. A detailed blue grid appears inside his mind as he activates an analysis technique. He uses the unique sword of subtle technique to find a hidden opening in the enemy's aggressive attack. The actual secret to this specific skill is not to aim directly at the opponent's body, but at something else entirely. He focuses his sharp gaze on the enemy's weapon, as that blade is his true target. The exact moment the enemy's sword enters his personal range, he activates the powerful dragon claws. The young heir then uses the legendary dragon capture technique belonging to the heavenly sword unit. With a sudden, blinding flash of light, the special technique finally connects with the intended target. The blade strikes the ground with an immense amount of force, creating a heavy impact that makes everything around the courtyard shake. The enemy guardian is quite astonished to realize that the young heir's sudden blow was easily blocked. With tightly clenched teeth, the young master displays an expression of pure shock at his move's unexpected failure. With that heavy clash, the weapon falls hard onto the floor, and the loud sound of metal echoes throughout the entire training courtyard. The brute mocks the situation openly, commenting that he honestly expected something much more impressive from a fighter of that high family level. Realizing the massive power difference between them, the protagonist quickly retreats and notes to himself that his special capture technique completely failed to work. Watching the whole fight from a safe distance, the arrogant fiancée remarks that she is truly glad she came to check on her future groom in person. Walking away with an air of complete superiority, she warns him that she expects to see much more gentle behavior from his side during the grand feast that will be held later today. Then, the other servant girl screams out in total despair while holding the limp body of her close friend, who has fallen onto the cold floor. The young boy is completely frozen in horror upon seeing the deplorable state of his most faithful assistant. With an icy, dark glare, the noble lady of the Tang clan leaves the area, accompanied by her numerous private bodyguards. She reflects to herself that the young heir's current condition is very different from the weak rumors she heard, and warns herself that this could ruin her evil plans. At that exact moment, the woman asks her elite fighter what he truly thought of the opponent's real skills during their brief clash. The veteran warrior replies that the young boy is still very weak and notes that just 2 basic subordinates would be more than enough to take him down for good. But the cruel villainess orders them to send 4 of their best men at once to make absolutely sure the boy does not show up at the feast, no matter what happens. Deeply desperate, the protagonist holds the unconscious young woman tightly in his arms and begs her to try to stay conscious at all costs. He quickly analyzes her physical condition and begins to suspect that a deadly, hidden poison was used against her in a highly cowardly way. Looking over at the scattered food on the ground, the hero feels an uncontrollable fury building up deep inside his chest at this sad scene. He remembers clearly how happy the young woman was just moments before, promising to bring a special warm meal for her master to enjoy. Overcome by pure hatred, the master grinds his teeth together in rage and silently swears to himself that all those responsible for this act will pay dearly. With the helpless maid cradled in his arms, the hero shouts out in blind rage and swears he will get his ultimate revenge on everyone involved. He then demands his sword from the other servant girl, and she quickly hands the weapon over to her master without a second thought. Hiding nearby in the shadows, A young apprentice is completely shocked by the violent scene and wonders what in the world just happened there. Inside the clan's medical room, the surrounding air felt incredibly heavy. Rows of dark medicine jars lined the old walls. But the entire situation looked extremely grim for the poor girl who got caught in the crossfire. The old doctor quickly delivered the tragic news directly to Mu Myong. They had already provided some basic emergency treatment, but it was clear to everyone that simple medicine would never be enough to save Wal Yong from this terrible state. This situation was definitely not an accident. The doctor carefully pulled out a tiny needle, instantly confirming Mu Myong's very worst fears. It was the Tang clan's unique signature poison, a highly lethal toxin specifically designed to kill a person without leaving a single trace behind. Wal Yong lay there completely pale and sweating heavily, as the dark poison was already ravaging her weak body. Without getting the specific antidote from the Tang clan themselves, there was absolutely no possible way to save her life. It seemed like everything was over. Mu Myong stood there in complete silence, his eyes turning dark with a cold, righteous fury. The young girl had done absolutely nothing wrong, yet his so-called fiancé had marked her for a painful death just to make a petty point. Our boy did not waste another single second. He firmly told the remaining maid to look after the sick girl, then turned his back to leave the room. The time for talking was officially done. It was finally time to go out and get some real answers. The maid called out to him loudly, feeling deeply worried about where he was going with that sharp sword gripped in his hand. Mu Myong did not look back at her at all. He had a specific destination in his mind and a heavy debt to settle before the night ended. He recalled the grand banquet for the family head that was happening later this evening. Missing his own father's celebration would certainly cause a massive scandal, but Mu Myong had a very different kind of appearance planned for the royal guests. Mu Myong gritted his teeth together tightly, his face twisting in pure, unbridled rage. If they truly wanted to see a piece of trash, he would show them exactly how dangerous a cornered man could be. They certainly would not forget him after tonight. Meanwhile, Cheon Sunhak was walking calmly through the clan's grand halls. The powerful uncle looked deep in thought, clearly bothered by the sudden arrival of the Tang clan and the heavy tension building up in the air. He muttered quietly to himself, wondering what on earth his own brother was thinking. Bringing that dangerous clan into their private home was exactly like inviting a wild tiger inside the house. Eventually, those outsiders would try to swallow the entire Cheon Clan whole. Suddenly, Cheon Sunhak's sharp eyes narrowed instantly. He was a highly seasoned warrior, and he noticed that something in the surrounding atmosphere had suddenly shifted. It was a vibe so thick and heavy that it was completely impossible for a top master like him to miss it. The old man stopped dead in his tracks right there. He turned his body toward the distant training grounds, clearly sensing a powerful presence that should not be there at all. This energy was not just raw strength. It was a deep, overwhelming, and murderous intent. He realized with shock that the terrifying aura was coming directly from his nephew. The old master could barely believe his own sharp senses. That kind of heavy pressure should never be coming from the young boy that everyone labeled a useless piece of trash. Over at the training clearing, the local birds were completely panicking. They scattered quickly into the sky as a wave of raw energy surged heavily through the trees, signaling that something wild was taking place below. White feathers drifted slowly through the air like snow after a massive physical impact. The dense forest stayed silent for a brief split second before the loud sounds of steel cutting violently through would erupted once again. The display was absolutely brutal. There was Mu Myong, his rapid movements appearing as nothing but a blur of speed and precision. He was not just practicing his basic forms anymore. He was venting every single bit of his deep frustration and blind anger directly into his sword. The nearby trees did not stand a single chance against him. With every single powerful swing, massive wooden trunks were cleanly sliced and shredded as if they were made of thin paper. Mu Myong was pushing his physical body to its absolute limits. The old man watched the spectacle from the dark shadows, feeling completely stunned by what he saw. He observed his nephew execute a strike so incredibly powerful that it sent wooden chips flying everywhere through the air. This was definitely not the weak boy he used to know in the past. The uncle stood there firmly with his arms crossed over his chest, his expression remaining completely unreadable. He was carefully analyzing every single movement, trying hard to understand where this sudden, terrifying surge of martial prowess had actually come from. He recognized the specific fighting stance almost immediately. It was definitely not the sky-severing sword style that their clan usually taught to reach for the heavens. This particular art was something much darker and far more direct than that. This was a true manslaying blade. It was a unique style built for one solitary purpose: killing the enemy. Cheon Sunhak could easily feel the raw anger and heavy murderous intent radiating off Mu Myong with every single breath the boy took. The old master looked genuinely concerned for his well-being. At this extreme rate, he feared that Mu Myong would be completely consumed by his own burning rage. A warrior who was driven solely by deep hate was a massive danger to everyone around them. Mu Myong let out a huge, roaring shout, his eyes wide with intense focus. He raised his heavy sword high above his head, putting every single bit of his pain into one last, heavy swing just to clear his mind. The blade slammed downward with a deafening crash, striking the massive tree trunk with absolute power. This guy was finally finished with his exhausting training routine, but he still looked completely on edge. The large tree split right down the middle, sending sharp wood shards flying in all directions. Mu Myong's final strike was pure destruction, but it still was not enough to calm the fierce storm raging inside his heart. He bent his body over, huffing and puffing loudly while thick sweat dripped down from his face. This training session was absolutely brutal, but the mere thought of failing his people once again was even more exhausting for him to bear. Suddenly, his uncle walked up. He mocked our boy, pointing out that he claimed to want to slice the heavens but was currently just taking his raw frustration out on defenseless trees. The old master stood right there with his arms crossed, looking as stern and cold as ever. He demanded to know what exactly had Mu Myong so terribly infuriated that he would wreck the forest clearing like this. Mu Myong did not try to make any cheap excuses. He just stood there with his back turned to his uncle and admitted the one painful truth: he could not escape anymore. He was simply just too weak. Because of his weakness, he kept failing to protect the innocent people around him. If he ever wants to keep his loved ones safe from harm, he knows deep down that he must transform into someone much stronger than this. Cheon Sunhak looked genuinely surprised upon hearing those bold words. He slowly repeated the phrase, "Your people," wondering to himself who exactly this supposed family scoundrel considered worthy of his personal protection and care. Without a single moment of hesitation, Mu Myong gripped the handle of his sword tightly. He loudly declared that his people were the ones he wanted to cherish and guard more than anything else in the world, the entire legendary Cheon Clan. The old master stood completely frozen, his eyes growing wide with shock. He had spent long years viewing his nephew as a completely hopeless case, but this level of deep resolve was something he never expected to see. He finally comprehended the hidden truth behind the boy's actions. Mu Myong was not just talking about saving simple servants or loyal followers. He was talking about the actual clan members he truly wanted to serve and keep safe with his own life. Cheon Sunhak realized that he had been way too narrow-minded regarding his nephew's true nature. He let out a small, satisfied grin. It turned out there was a genuine warrior hidden beneath that trashy reputation after all. Fine. He calmly reminded Mu Myong about the way he had copied the secret dragon's claw technique after seeing it performed just a single time. If the young boy was truly a martial arts genius, the uncle had one final, dangerous challenge ready for him. He slowly drew his sharp weapon from its sheath, and the surrounding air began to crackle with heavy spiritual energy. He asked if Mu Myong was truly prepared to prove those bold words and copy a legendary technique right now on the spot. Mu Myong did not utter a single word in response. He just stared directly at his uncle, his sharp gaze turning as fierce as a physical blade. He knew perfectly well that this was the one critical moment that would define his entire future. The older man explained that he had personally created a powerful follow-up movement to the Dragon's Claw art. It was a move so incredibly dangerous and lethal that he had never taught it to a single living soul before. The stance sat right on the dangerous edge of the forbidden, dark manslaying arts. The old man's face lit up with an intense, glowing purple aura as he demanded to know if Mu Maiyang truly wished to learn it. This special move was the final form of the legendary Heavenly Dragon Sword style. He sternly warned that this movement shows the entire world exactly what happens when you dare to touch the dragon's reverse scale. The surrounding air suddenly exploded with a bright pink energy as the old man charged forward across the clearing. His internal power was spiraling completely out of control as he prepared to unleash the terrifying force of the dragon's wrath. Mu Maiyang stood there completely frozen and stunned by the massive display of power. He had never witnessed raw power like this before in his life, and the sheer physical force of the movement was enough to make his hair stand up on end. The reverse scale slash! The old man roared out loudly, swinging his heavy blade with absolutely everything he had. The solid ground shook violently beneath their feet, and the sky itself seemed to scream as the ultimate technique was finally unleashed. A massive, swirling vortex of heavy wind and spiritual energy shot straight up into the high sky. It looked as if a destructive hurricane had just been born inside the quiet forest, effortlessly destroying every single thing in its direct path. Not far away, a small group of nearby trainees nearly jumped right out of their skins from the shock. They stared blankly at the massive vortex rising in the distance, wondering what kind of powerful monster was causing such insane destruction in the woods. One of the older guys quickly told the others to focus on their task. They did not have any spare time to gawk at the wild weather. They had to finish their sketchy secret mission before the grand banquet actually started. He pulled a small vial of nasty, dark poison out of his pocket, wearing a wicked grin. This dangerous stuff would make Mu Maiyang look completely wasted and out of his mind, completely trashing his new reputation right during the most important ceremony of the entire year. These sneaky rats moved quickly through the thick woods, feeling highly confident that their plan was totally foolproof. They felt entirely certain that the family trash would never see them coming, completely unaware that Mu Maiyang was currently occupied with some incredibly intense training. Mu Maiyang stood there in absolute silence, his clothes completely torn to shreds and his body covered in thick sweat. The sheer, overwhelming power of his uncle's demonstration had left him completely breathless and buried deep in thought. He looked up at the looming, powerful figure of his uncle, wondering to himself if the old man was actually attempting to kill him during this lesson. Mu Maiyang's own aura remained incredibly heavy and thick, even after the move was finished. Our young boy looked around at the absolute state of carnage left behind in the forest clearing. Massive trees were snapped completely in half like fragile toothpicks, proving beyond a doubt that the reverse scale slash was on a totally different level of destruction. The uncle stood tall, calmly asking if his nephew finally understood the massive difference in power. The basic dragon's claw was merely the introductory beginning. This dangerous new technique represented the true, absolute peak of their clan's hidden martial arts. The old man went on to explain the core spiritual concept behind their family style. When a true swordsman finally reaches a certain high level of mastery, the blade ceases to be a simple tool. It genuinely feels like a natural extension of their own physical body. This absolute identification of sword and body is exactly the concept that the dragon's claw exploits against enemies. Most ordinary warriors fall easily for this illusion, falsely thinking they are completely one with their weapon until it is far too late. But in that exact moment of foolish overconfidence, the sword can be ripped right away from them. A true master can force the weapon to leave the opponent's body instantly, leaving the enemy completely defenseless against a final killing blow. The old man honestly admitted that even the great dragon's claw has its own natural limits. Against a true, elite master who can see right through the trick, it simply will not work, which is exactly why this second hidden form is absolutely necessary to win. A sudden chill ran down Mu Maiyang's spine as the vivid memory of his past defeat flashed sharply before his eyes. He had learned a truly bitter lesson about what happens when you face an aggressive opponent who is standing on an entirely superior level of power. The old man's eyes sparkled with a deep intensity as he continued providing his valuable lesson to the boy. He told Mu Maiyang that there is an even deeper kind of illusion that even the greatest grandmasters on earth will easily fall for. The old master leaned in closer, his facial expression turning dead serious. He challenged our young boy to guess what that ultimate secret could possibly be, severely testing his natural intuition and his true understanding of the blade. Mu Myong's eyes widened instantly as the shocking realization hit his mind like a lightning bolt. He finally saw it clearly, the hidden heaven that sat at the very heart of that dangerous reverse scale/technique. The old man did not waste a single moment with useless praise or flattery. He just looked straight at his nephew and asked the only question that truly mattered in this situation. Could he actually pull off a difficult move of that massive caliber on his own? Mu Myong looked back at the ruined, shattered remains of the forest clearing. Being completely honest with himself, he admitted that reaching such a high level of mastery instantly was practically impossible for any normal person. But his sharp gaze never wavered for a second as he looked back at his uncle. He made a very bold and solemn vow right then and there to completely master the technique before the grand banquet even started tonight. The old man did not seem to care about the mechanics of the technique anymore. He looked Mu Myong directly in the eye and asked if the young boy could truly fulfill his heavy promise and protect the entire Cheon clan from harm. The immense weight of that serious question hung heavily in the air, briefly catching Mu Myong off guard. It was no longer just about practicing martial arts. It was about the grand responsibility he had finally chosen to carry on his shoulders. A small, highly confident grin spread across our young boy's face. He was definitely not the same arrogant piece of trash that he used to be in the past. He possessed a brand new purpose and the relentless drive to see it through to the very end. Standing tall with his weapon resting at his side, Mu Myong promised to make it happen. He would protect his people and his beloved clan, no matter what kind of dangerous enemies came their way in the future. The old man gave a highly satisfied nod, smoothly sheathing his own weapon back into its scabbard. He was starting to see the genuine potential hidden deep within his nephew, and he liked what he saw so far. The old man briefly mentioned the sketchy rats hiding nearby in the bushes before heading off toward the banquet hall. He left the final cleanup to Mu Myong, fully trusting him to handle the uninvited guests properly. As his uncle walked away, Mu Myong stayed behind alone in the quiet clearing. The forest was dead silent, but he knew perfectly well that he was not alone. The hidden enemies were closely watching his every single move from the shadows. He took a deep, calm breath, his facial expression shifting from determined to completely deadly. It was finally time to stop talking and start acting immediately. The grand banquet was approaching incredibly fast after all. Mu Myong's face twisted into a terrifying scowl as he glared toward the nearby bushes. He was fully ready to hunt down the sneaky rats who thought they could sneak onto his family's land. He stood firmly in the middle of the path, staring right at the hidden assassins who were clumsily disguised as clan trainees. These creeps had absolutely no idea that they were about to become his personal training dummies for his new technique. Just as they expected, Mu Myong was already onto their little game. The three fake trainees did not waste any more time and jumped out from the trees, launching a coordinated surprise attack. They tried to play it cool at first, politely bowing and apologizing for the sudden interruption. The leader falsely claimed they were just regular trainees looking for a quiet place to practice their forms. Nice try, you absolute creeps. Mu Myong was not buying a single word of their silly story. He pointed his sharp sword right at them, openly calling out their rotten, wrinkled old geezer faces. Clearly, these mature guys were way too old to be young students. Turns out our young boy has every single legitimate trainee's name memorized, and these three creeps definitely were not on that official list. Instead of being worried about the ambush, he actually seemed thrilled to have fresh sparring partners to test his skills on. Realizing their cover was totally blown, the lead assassin instantly dropped the fake act. He loudly ordered his men to subdue the young lord immediately and feed him that paralyzing poison they had brought along. Meanwhile, the scene quickly shifts over to the most secluded training ground within the vast family residence. While Mu Myong dealt with the sneaky rats in the woods, the rest of the clan was very busy. The other trainees who had been completely wrecked by Mu Myong earlier were now training like men possessed by demons. His massive display of power had clearly lit a fierce fire under every single one of them. Nung Ryowon was pushing his physical body to the absolute limit, sprinting wildly through the dense forest. He was deeply determined to get his stolen sword back from the young lord as soon as humanly possible. Even Myung-hak was getting in on the intense action, pumping heavy iron weights until his muscles screamed in pain. It seemed like the entire clan was suddenly obsessed with getting stronger just for Mu Myung. Suddenly, a random trainee came charging into the training area, screaming his head off in absolute terror. He looked exactly like he had seen a terrifying ghost, shouting loudly that there was a massive problem regarding the young lord. But the others were so deeply immersed in their own grueling training that they barely even noticed his presence. Everyone was busy doing their own extreme thing, from balancing handstands to lifting massive wooden logs. The poor guy was practically begging for someone to pay a little bit of attention to him. He finally managed to catch his breath enough to start explaining the wild event that had happened with Mu Myung just moments ago. The very moment he uttered the young master's title, Nung Ryowon and Myung-hak immediately locked their gaze onto him. Their eyes practically gleamed with a terrifying level of intense focus and sheer curiosity. The frantic messenger felt completely bewildered by their bizarre reaction. He instantly understood that these warriors were not merely practicing. They had become entirely consumed by thoughts of Mu Myung. He simply advised them to put some proper clothes on. Meanwhile, back in the quiet woodland, the daylight filtered softly through the branches. But that serene silence did not endure for long. A fierce storm was brewing as the hidden infiltrators prepared to launch their next strike. Sudden crashing noises and the sound of rustling foliage echoed loudly through the trees. The skirmish had officially commenced, and it was entirely evident that the situation was about to turn incredibly chaotic. Mu Myung did not falter for a single second, colliding his blade against the lead attacker's weapon in a brilliant cascade of sparks. Despite their mature age and extensive combat experience, this young man was easily holding his own against the professional killers. One of the scoundrels was already lying face down in the dirt while Mu Myung single-handedly engaged the remaining two. He navigated the battlefield with a fluid elegance that left the fraudulent novices completely stunned. He spun effortlessly through their aggressive assaults, his rapid maneuvers appearing as nothing but a flawless blur of speed and precision. The mercenaries quickly realized they had drastically underestimated just how lethal this opponent truly was. With a swift, powerful thrust, Mu Myung drove the pommel of his sword directly into the commander's ribs. The heavy impact was more than enough to instantly knock the breath right out of the man. The bearded rogue collapsed heavily onto the forest floor, clutching his torso and desperately gasping for oxygen. He simply could not comprehend how a supposed family failure like Mu Myung could wield such terrifying physical power. Mu Myung stood over him, looking down with an entirely detached and cold expression. Out of nowhere, the three elite operatives dispatched to eliminate him had been reduced to mere sparring partners for him to release his pent-up rage. Mu Myung stood perfectly tall amidst the trio of attackers he had just thoroughly humbled on the battlefield. One of them desperately attempted to scramble to his feet, plotting a hasty retreat, but his every motion was instantly detected by Mu Myung's sharp gaze. Struggling to breathe, the lead mercenary realized that the rumors regarding the young lord were nothing but complete fabrications. This young man was actually gaining speed in the middle of the combat, making it virtually impossible to keep pace with their current equipment. The rogue grumbled bitterly about his weapon. Being forced to disguise themselves as Chin novices meant he could not employ his familiar Tang Clan scimitar, which was seriously disrupting his natural fighting rhythm. Thick sweat poured down the operative's face as the grim reality finally hit his mind. They had completely misjudged the young master, foolishly believing he was still the same incompetent simpleton described in the gossip. Mu Myung stood his ground firmly, appearing entirely unbothered by the tense situation. He calmly demanded to know if they were ready to confess their ultimate objectives, already fully aware of the exact faction that had deployed them. The intruder clenched his teeth in fury, raising his weapon high above his head. He openly challenged Mu Myung, asserting that without concrete evidence, the young lord could never officially implicate the Tang clan's covert operations. Our protagonist merely regarded him with genuine pity. He required no formal confession to discern the underlying truth. After all, The Tang clan was the solitary family arrogant enough to orchestrate such a reckless scheme. The operative's eyes dilated in absolute astonishment. He had never expected the young master to be this remarkably astute, let alone so thoroughly poised while confronting 3 veteran killers deep in the woods. Mu Maiyong smirked, genuinely enjoying the adversary's growing panic. He had no need for legal confirmation. If the entire realm suspected the Tang clan, that reputational damage alone would be more than enough to shatter the political marriage contract for good. The mercenary was absolutely seething with rage. His teeth bared in a desperate, animalistic snarl. He mocked Mu Maiyong for being young and short-sighted, stubbornly refusing to accept that he had been completely outsmarted by a mere teenager. Our hero, however, was no longer interested in empty banter. He gripped his sword firmly, experiencing a strange, sudden surge of internal confidence. He was entirely prepared to evaluate his newly acquired capabilities once and for all. In a sudden flash of movement, Mu Maiyong propelled himself directly at the assassin. The rogue barely possessed enough time to elevate his own blade before the young master delivered a devastating vertical overhead strike. He unleashed a fierce, echoing roar, channeling every single ounce of his arduous training into one definitive maneuver. This was the decisive moment, the legendary reverse scale slash that his uncle had demonstrated to him just moments ago. The absolute force of the secret technique was entirely overwhelming. The attacker struggled with every bit of his physical might to deflect the incoming blow, but the raw power backing the downward slash was simply too immense to withstand. The resulting impact was so massive that it sent a violent shockwave ripping through the entire woodland. Flocks of birds scattered into the heavens in pure panic as the surrounding environment itself buckled under the dragon's absolute wrath. As the billowing dust slowly settled, a colossal path had been cleanly carved straight through the dense trees. The bright sunlight poured down through the newly formed clearing, illuminating the true, incredible scale of Mu Maiyong's rapid ascension in power. Meanwhile, deeper within the thickets, the commander of the Tang forces anxiously checked his primitive sundial. He looked increasingly agitated and restless, openly wondering why the 3 elite operatives he had dispatched to neutralize the young lord had not yet returned to camp. The clock was ticking away rapidly. A full 45 minutes had elapsed since the trio departed, and the ominous silence echoing from the forest was beginning to feel incredibly heavy. Something had clearly gone awry. The commander's face twisted with intense anxiety. If his operatives had actually failed their objective, it implied the young master was far more formidable than they originally anticipated, putting their entire covert operation in extreme jeopardy. He paced restlessly back and forth, frantically orchestrating his next tactical move. He knew he had to obliterate all physical evidence of their infiltration before the Cheon Clan's tracking hounds managed to detect their scent. Meanwhile, detailed reports of the earlier courtyard confrontation were rapidly circulating among the remaining disciples. The novices were absolutely astonished that the haughty Tang clan had attempted to execute a helpless maid over such a trivial mishap. A small group of disciples walked cautiously through the woodland, discussing the terrifying reputation of their noble visitors. They had heard rumors that the Tang clan's internal regulations were incredibly draconian and frequently resulted in bloodshed. They spoke in hushed whispers regarding the Tang clan's fatal toxins and concealed armaments. Apparently, an unsuspecting target could be assassinated without ever identifying the assailant, making them an absolute nightmare to encounter in the martial world. One senior disciple explained that even an inadvertent physical contact with a direct lineage member of the Tang family could result in an immediate execution. There were absolutely no exceptions to this rule, and anyone who crossed their path typically ended up dead. He vividly recalled an occasion when he witnessed an entire crowd panic just to avoid accidentally bumping into the young noblewoman. The profound dread they inspired was so overwhelming that people would literally leap out of the way to clear a path. This seasoned disciple sighed heavily, suddenly realizing that they actually enjoyed a peaceful life within the Cheon clan. Compared to those ruthless Tang clan monsters, their own masters were remarkably lenient, and he certainly was not complaining about it. The others nodded in silent agreement, feeling grateful for their own family's unusual sense of fairness. Even if their young master was widely considered a reckless scoundrel, At least they were not facing execution for every minor blunder, which was honestly a complete miracle. The disciples marveled at how wonderfully unique their own organization truly was. Even Nung Raewon, who had openly defied the young master's authority earlier, was still walking around perfectly healthy instead of being executed on the spot for his blatant insolence. In any other prominent martial family, Nung Raewon's severed head would have already been presented on a silver platter to appease the elders. They simply could not comprehend how much disrespect the lenient Chin family leaders were willing to tolerate from their own subordinates. They began discussing whether they should actively step forward and offer their assistance to Mu Myong. He was currently the solitary individual capable of confronting the Tang clan's tyranny, while everyone else was occupied with playing host to the guests. However, Nung Raewon looked entirely skeptical, openly wondering what kind of meaningful assistance they could possibly provide. He knew perfectly well that the immense power gap between ordinary novices and the true titans of the martial world was still far too massive to bridge. Suddenly, the 5-second disciple stepped forward aggressively, barking loudly that he could no longer tolerate such blatant disrespect toward their name. He quickly rallied a small group of loyal followers, grandly proclaiming that the entire clan's prestige was now hanging in the balance. He urgently pressured the group to locate the young master first before formulating a definitive counterplan. Yet, several skeptical trainees were not buying his sudden display of deep loyalty, finding his behavior totally untrustworthy and suspicious. It turns out this deceptive individual was merely a slimy opportunist seeking a convenient method to climb the organizational ladder. He figured that if he played his cards correctly, he could easily win back everyone's favor and secure a promotion. The rogue even contemplated switching his allegiance to the Tang clan if the situation became far too hazardous for his liking. He was fully prepared to betray his own young master just to protect his own skin. While lurking stealthily in the thick bushes, he abruptly spotted a highly suspicious activity deep within the dense forest. An elite Tang clan operative was crouched low on the dirt, clearly up to no good in the dim shadows. The senior trainee froze instantly, his eyes widening in complete bewilderment. He could not comprehend why a legendary Tang warrior would be out here entirely alone, acting so remarkably suspicious in such a secluded spot. He watched intently as the hidden assassin attempted to ignite a small fire to burn a pile of discarded garments. It was entirely obvious that the rogue was desperately attempting to destroy incriminating evidence of some sinister deed. The Tang warrior blew gently on the glowing embers, his stern face illuminated by the flickering light of the growing flame. He was focused entirely on completing his urgent task, completely unaware that he was being closely observed from the nearby foliage. Suddenly, the assassin's eyes snapped wide open in sharp realization. He sensed a foreign presence nearby and turned his head violently, catching the senior trainee spying directly on his secret little bonfire in the woods. The terrified trainee did not linger around to see what would happen next. He scrambled away as fast as his legs could carry him, screaming in pure terror the moment he realized his presence was compromised. He looked back with a face full of immense regret, sweating profusely, as the grim reality hit him that he had stumbled straight into a lethal trap. Spying on a professional assassin was undoubtedly the worst decision he had ever made in his life. He tumbled clumsily onto the dirt path right in front of his traveling companions, his heart pounding violently against his ribs. The other disciples just watched him fall in astonishment, completely confused by his sudden, chaotic entrance. He screamed at the absolute top of his lungs, his face twisted into a horrific mask of pure agony and frantic dread. He realized his secret opportunity for advancement had just transformed into a massive waking nightmare. His companions were totally baffled by the display, urgently asking their senior what on earth was wrong with him. They had absolutely no inkling that a cold-blooded killer was tracking his footsteps at that very moment. The panicked man was practically hyperventilating, babbling incoherently about how he had mistakenly witnessed something he never should have seen. He knew he had messed up catastrophically, and there was absolutely no turning back now. Just as the other novices stood there looking bewildered, the surrounding air suddenly turned freezing. They did not comprehend that a dark shadow was looming directly over them from the branches above. Unbelievably, the Tang clan operative launched himself into the air, weapon drawn and prepared to strike. He was not about to permit any eyewitnesses to escape with his sinister secrets. The senior trainee could only curse under his breath as demise came screaming down toward him. He understood he was in deep trouble and his little scheme had totally backfired. Crimson blood sprayed everywhere as the assailant's blade found its mark in a swift blur of motion. The senior novice's worst fears had finally manifested in the most violent manner possible. In the middle of the deep woodland, the Tang clan cleaner is busy trying to incinerate a pile of incriminating garments. He is completely blindsided when a group of Chin novices suddenly surrounds him on the path. Realizing his presence is compromised, the veteran mercenary leaps into the air with his blade unsheathed. He knows he must eliminate any witnesses before the underlying truth about the ambush on the eldest young master leaks out. His eyes are filled with a cold, desperate determination as he targets the nearest disciple. For a professional operative like him, failure is not an option and anyone who observed those clothes must perish. A loud metallic clang echoes through the trees as one of the disciples deflects the heavy overhead strike. The rest of the squad watches in absolute shock as their comrade manages to hold his ground against such a devastating blow. The Chin disciple grits his teeth, his weapon vibrating under the sheer weight of the assassin's immense pressure. He is proving to be far stronger than his rank indicates, pushing back against the veteran warrior with surprising physical force. The Tang clan cleaner simply cannot believe what is unfolding. He fully anticipated cutting through these kids like they were nothing, not being stalled by a group he views as mere students. Another novice seizes the sudden opening and charges in, forcing the assassin to divide his focus. It is becoming entirely clear that this will not be a one-sided massacre for the Tang veteran. The squad moves with incredible synchronization, their blades flashing as they hem the mercenary in from all directions. The Chin training grounds have clearly been producing far more dangerous combatants lately. The assassin pulls back to catch his breath, staring at his young adversaries with genuine bewilderment. He has never witnessed trainees move with this kind of speed and tactical coordination before. The loyal disciple steps forward, proudly explaining that they are not just any regular novices anymore. Ever since they began training relentlessly to catch up to the eldest young master, their old limitations have been completely shattered. He quickly silences his companion with a well-timed punch before he can reveal too many embarrassing facts about their bare-body drills. Some of their more grueling training secrets are better left unsaid. These men are elite prospects for the Heavenly Dragon and Phoenix divisions, aiming for the absolute summit of the clan's forces. They have been personally forged by Commander Chin Sunhak to be the clan's most overwhelming swordsmen. Only the top echelon of candidates are selected for these units, and this group represents the absolute cream of the crop. The loyal novice emphasizes that their strength originates from a level of dedication the attacker clearly underestimated. The Tang warrior sneers, refusing to be intimidated by a group of upstarts. He readies his blade one more time, determined to show these prospects the difference between basic training and a real-life duel to the death. Just as he believes he has a fighting chance, two more disciples emerge from the path, evening the odds even further. It is now 7 against 1, and the veteran assassin is starting to look genuinely cornered. The Tang clan operative was utterly stunned. He was certain he had already neutralized those Tuchin trainees first. But then his eyes dilated as a chilling realization suddenly struck his mind. He had overlooked a critical detail. He recalled the exact moment he dealt the finishing blow. Somehow, both of them had managed to draw their swords just in time to parry his lethal strike. They are incredibly persistent, he noted grimly to himself. The novices maintained their tight formation, keeping their prisoner tightly secured as they prepare to haul him back to the estate. They know he is highly dangerous, so they are taking no chances whatsoever with his capture. Instead of displaying fear, the assassin begins to chuckle, a low and raspy sound that sends an immediate chill through the group. He seems to find something deeply amusing about being apprehended by a group of students. He mocks them as newborn pups who have absolutely no idea how deep the world's dark shadows really go. Even as he is being thoroughly subdued, he still behaves as if he is the one in total control of the situation. His arrogant boasting does not rescue him from being knocked unconscious and carried away. The group starts the long journey back to the manor, hauling their heavy captive over a shoulder. As the squad marches through the thickets, they carry the captured operative like a trophy of their first major victory. It is a genuine moment of triumph for the disciples, but the woodland is still teeming with hidden secrets. Lysiaki, the senior trainee, suddenly halts his steps and clutches his abdomen with a pained grimace. He loudly claims his stomach is in knots, insisting he requires a moment alone to handle some urgent personal business in the nearby bushes. He instructs the others to proceed ahead while he catches up later, sounding as though he is in a tremendous rush. The rest of the group feels quite annoyed by his terrible timing, but they leave him behind to search for a secluded spot. Once they are completely out of sight, Lysiak's abdominal pain miraculously vanishes as he drops to his knees by the smoldering pile of garments. He was not indisposed at all. He merely desired a private moment alone with the partially incinerated evidence. He instantly realizes that these half-destroyed Tang Clan uniforms represent a total goldmine of valuable information. He calculates that retaining this concrete proof could serve as his ultimate insurance policy if he ever needs to abandon his allies and defect to the Tang Clan. Without a second thought, he stuffs the charred fabric deep into the front of his robes, concealing it meticulously away. He has always operated as a cynical opportunist, and today he just discovered his greatest leverage yet. The tranquil forest atmosphere settles quietly as he finishes hiding his treacherous prize. The narrator observes that while Lysiak is a total scoundrel, his selfish choice ironically ended up preserving the single most critical piece of evidence. Deeper within the woods, another squad of trainees is frantically searching for the eldest young master before the grand banquet begins. They understand that if he remains missing at the start, there will be serious trouble with the elite Tang guests. One of them suddenly pauses, his ears detecting a faint movement in the immediate vicinity. There is someone standing in the clearing just ahead, and they do not possess the appearance of an adversary. In a highly secluded spot, Mu Myong calmly inspects a small glass vial with a sharp, focused look in his eyes. He has completely transformed. No longer the bloated wastrel everyone remembers, but a lean and athletic swordsman. He stands over a fallen body with a cold intensity, resembling a man who has finally taken absolute command of his own destiny. The transition is entirely complete, and the new Mu Myong is prepared to confront his family and his formidable foes alike. Back at the primary manor, the sun begins to set over the grand banquet hall, where the powerful clan alliance is about to be celebrated. The patriarch is finally making his grand entrance, signaling that the formal proceedings are now underway. The guests all fall silent and bow deeply as the formidable figure walks through the center of the hall. Every eye is fixed intently on the man who holds the absolute sovereignty of the Qin family. The patriarch stands tall at the front, his mere presence sufficient to command the entire room's absolute attention. He looks every bit the formidable, profound realm master that he is rumored to be. With his sharp amber eyes and stern, dignified beard, the patriarch carefully surveys the assembled crowd. He is a leader who values strength and fidelity above all else, and his sharp gaze is enough to make anyone tremble with anxiety. The guests whisper in hushed tones, completely struck by how remarkably handsome and elegant the patriarch appears. Even members of the rival Tang clan cannot help but feel deeply impressed by his majestic aura. To the skilled martial artists in the hall, he is perceived as a perfectly forged weapon, sharp, refined, and incredibly dangerous. He stands as the ultimate paragon of what every swordsman within the organization aspires to become. The patriarch brings his hands together in a formal martial greeting, officially declaring the banquet open. The stage is perfectly set for a major political maneuver, and the air is thick with anticipation for what is about to be disclosed. Inside the grand banquet hall, the patriarch stands before his assembled guests with an exceptionally dignified air. He expresses his gratitude to everyone for gracing the event with their presence. Before the grand festivities officially commence, he announces that he possesses a very special guest to introduce to the grand assembly. All eyes are instantly locked on him, waiting anxiously for the big reveal. A guard's booming voice rings out through the hall, loudly announcing the arrival of the young lady of the Cheon Clan. The guests are immediately placed on edge at the mere mention of the legendary poison masters. The massive wooden doors creak open, and a profound hush falls over the entire crowd. Mysterious rumors regarding the secretive Cheon clan have everyone whispering in deep anticipation of what is about to unfold. Tang Sohai makes her grand entrance, radiating a striking aura of cold beauty, while flanked by her formidable personal entourage. The guests are utterly captivated, nodding to one another that she truly lives up to her reputation as the preeminent beauty in Sichuan. The patriarch looks on, his facial expression remaining entirely unreadable as he begins to explain the true purpose of this grand gathering. He strongly emphasizes the absolute necessity to nurture and solidify their clan's enduring relationship with the Tang family. With a firm, authoritative voice, the patriarch officially proclaims a strategic marriage alliance between the two formidable factions. This is precisely the critical juncture everyone has been eagerly anticipating. The bold declaration sends an immediate shockwave through the assembled guests, who instantly begin whispering and gossiping about the match. Many appear entirely bewildered, openly wondering why such a prestigious noblewoman would be paired with the organization's notorious, deadbeat eldest son. Cheon Sunhak narrows his sharp eyes, meticulously evaluating the crowd's erratic reaction. He seems to be calculating every minor detail of this high-stakes political maneuver in his mind. Behind her ornate paper fan, Tang Sohai permits herself a subtle, satisfied smirk. To her, everything appears to be unfolding exactly according to her meticulous strategy. She stares directly ahead, entirely confident that since the patriarch has delivered the official proclamation, the decision is absolute and cannot be rescinded. She has successfully secured this round. The patriarch, however, appears somewhat preoccupied as he observes the conspicuous absence of the Council of Elders. He silently ponders if his primary family will ever be genuinely united in their ultimate goals. Turning toward a nearby attendant, the patriarch sternly inquires about the whereabouts of his eldest son, having strictly commanded him to attend the event regardless of the circumstances. The anxious servant nervously reports that Mu Myong is currently nowhere to be found on the entire estate grounds. Tang Sohai and her elderly advisor exchange a knowing, secretive glance. Since the notorious wastrel has failed to show his face, they firmly believe their earlier interference with him was a flawless success. They have even strategically stationed covert personnel outside the perimeter under the guise of extra security to ensure he cannot disrupt the formal proceedings. They genuinely think they have covered every conceivable base. Seeing no other viable alternative but to proceed without his offspring, the patriarch elevates his voice and signals for the banquet festivities to finally commence. The grand celebration begins, yet the heavy atmosphere remains thick with unresolved inquiries. As night falls completely, the grand banquet hall is brilliantly illuminated, standing as a majestic beacon of the clan's sovereignty and prestige against the darkening horizon. Everything appears absolutely perfect on the outside. At the head table, the patriarch is rapidly losing his patience, demanding once more if there is any visible sign of Mu Myong. The attendant's response remains a definitive negative. The young man is still missing from the venue. The patriarch slowly rises to his feet, preparing to address the audience as the evening's formal schedule begins to draw to a close. He maintains his regal composure flawlessly despite the intense frustration bubbling beneath his calm exterior. He begins to express his gratitude to the guests once more, mentioning that elite clan warriors will safely escort them home despite the current curfew. Suddenly, a massive, booming crash violently interrupts his speech, echoing loudly through the entire structure. The patriarch snaps his head toward the grand entrance, his eyes wide with astonishment at the sudden, violent intrusion. Something is catastrophically wrong. Widespread panic begins to ripple through the guests, as frightened individuals shout that the frontline security perimeter has been completely obliterated. No one can fathom that anyone would possess the audacity to disrupt such a high-profile event. A sentry is suddenly sent flying brutally through the heavy doors, his physical body crashing onto the floor with a violent force that thoroughly shocks everyone present. It is entirely clear that an incredibly powerful and resolute individual is making a grand entrance. The wounded guard groans in deep agony as he slides across the scarlet carpet, completely unable to halt his momentum. The guests seated at the tables are frozen in sheer shock, unable to comprehend the staggering level of physical strength they just witnessed. A new figure strides boldly into the hall, his leather boots clicking firmly against the polished floor as he loudly questions how a mere outsider could ever presume to obstruct his path. The voice is undeniably familiar, but the commanding tone is entirely unprecedented. The patriarch and the stunned Tang diplomats stare in absolute disbelief at the entryway. Tang Sohai slowly lowers her fan, her eyes narrowing in intense irritation as she realizes that her flawless plan might have just encountered a catastrophic obstacle. Her calm exterior is finally starting to fracture. Mu Myong strides confidently into the exact center of the hall, looking absolutely nothing like the bloated scoundrel everyone remembers from the past. He is followed closely by a fiercely loyal squad of trainees, all moving with a newfound sense of clear purpose and rigorous martial discipline.